hour, and the country's most wanted convicted rapist and murderer, Thabo Bester, and his girlfriend, Dr Nandipha Magudumana, have now arrived back in the country under heavy police guard. Newzroom Afrika can confirm that the pair landed in the early hours of this morning. The time we have is 3:59. They were arrested, you'll remember, in Tanzania last week alongside a Mozambican national who's believed to have aided their escape. Now, a South African delegation left over the weekend to negotiate their return. Since the couple's capture in Arusha, there have been extraordinary developments, including 4 arrests in South Africa and a parliamentary probe, which kicked off just yesterday. But let's start with the very latest. Live from Lanseria this morning, that's where we find my co-anchor Ayanda Nyati, who's following that story, and he joins us this morning. Wow, Ayanda, it is so difficult to keep up, but for our viewers who are waking up on this Thursday morning, what do they need to know?
Well, Michelle, it's absolutely been an spectacular past couple of weeks, hasn't it? I mean, we moved from authorities initially denying that a convicted murderer and rapist had escaped from jail to conceding that Thabo Bester did in fact fake his death and made a run for it. And since then, as you mentioned, the details have been coming in thick and fast. So far, we know that the time was 3:59 Central African time, where that flight, ZDSFJ, I beg your pardon, arrived here in South Africa at Lanseria International Airport. It left much earlier, just a few minutes after 1 a.m. in the morning from Kilimanjaro International Airport in Tanzania. When the plane arrived, we understand that there was a huge police contingent that immediately approached that particular aircraft to ensure that, of course, Dr Nandipha Magudumana and Thabo Bester are quite literally whisked away from this particular venue. It was a clean, kind of executed kind of operation, we understand, from where we're standing at the moment, including police enyalas that are going to take these 2 suspected criminals, or at least for Nandipha Magudumana, Thabo Bester was convicted, to a place where hopefully the next phase of their arrest actually kicks in. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Thabo Bester may be headed to Jose Mampuru Correctional Services. We are yet to independently confirm that ourselves. But procedurally speaking, Dr Nandipha Magudumana will be headed to holding cells, where of course we expect her to make her first court appearance and for the rest of the process to unfold thereafter. But it certainly is a penultimate moment. The authorities' job is nowhere near done, because if the first escape is anything to go by, we know that Thabo Bester is an incredibly connected man, at least if the evidence before us is anything to go by. And there are concerns from authorities that even just divulging too much information about the next steps may allow him to plan ahead, essentially, to plot the next plan of possibly another escape.
Absolutely. I mean, is this uncharted territory for South Africa and for law enforcement in our country? We heard yesterday in Parliament as MPs grilled those G4S officials. Of course, G4S is the security company in charge of the Mangaung maximum security prison. Not a lot of confidence being inspired by what those officials had to say, and MPs certainly not convinced.
It certainly is uncharted territory. In fact, it's also been described as an international disaster now, given the fact that we've had to have involvement from authorities beyond our borders. Look, if you find yourself at Lanseria Airport this morning, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's just any other day. But of course, what's taking place behind the scenes, we imagine, still must be absolutely spectacular. For one, there's going to be a concerted effort, as I mentioned before, to ensure that Thabo Bester is kept in the kind of environment where he's not able to make any kind of contact, in order to pull the strings that we now understand he pulled in May last year. It was the 3rd of May, we've now been told. And G4S officials there, many saying, actually in 6s and 7s, trying to explain how the series of events unfolded as they did, with no one supposedly knowing. Among the details that were revealed is that there were about 23 odd officials who were on duty at Mangaung Correctional Services on that day. And it appears that all 23 of them may have turned a blind eye. The Correctional Services Portfolio Committee in Parliament undertaking their own fact-finding mission by going to the prison themselves. We've been able to speak to some of the members of that Portfolio Committee, telling us that the security there actually involves pretty high-tech technology. And it becomes really difficult to believe, and I'm putting it lightly, that on the 3rd of May, when Thabo Bester made a run for it, we understand, that suddenly all of that technology happened to fail utterly. And it appears that all 23 of them may have turned a blind eye. The Correctional Services Portfolio Committee in Parliament undertaking their own fact-finding mission by going to the prison themselves. We've been able to speak to some of the members of that Portfolio Committee, telling us that the security there actually involves pretty high-tech technology. And it becomes really difficult to believe, and I'm putting it lightly, that on the 3rd of May, when Thabo Bester made a run for it, we understand, that suddenly all of that technology happened to fail at the right time. If G4S officials are going to be back in Parliament today, they have very serious questions to answer, despite the grilling that they faced yesterday.
Yeah. Coincidence? I think not. Ayanda, as the sun comes up behind you there at Lanseria Airport, as you say, this story is far from over, especially given just how many people would have had to be involved in the escape planned by Thabo Bester and whoever else helped him. The question now is, how far up do the connections that he so clearly has, how far up do they go?
Absolutely. And with the time that the story has been in the public domain, there are people who are equally concerned how much of a cover-up has taken place since we learned and it was officially confirmed that Thabo Bester has escaped. You know, things like the shredding of documents, the cleaning of certain spaces that could have provided very important evidence as we try to piece together how this may have taken place. Groundup, who we of course have been crediting for really doing the dog work of putting the story in the spotlight, have also mentioned in some parts that there may very well be senior officials who have been involved. The obvious questions, of course, for many South Africans whose imaginations have been captured by the story, understandably, is how much of those officials have had time to now cover their own tracks to ensure that they are not necessarily implicated in the kind of ways that would see them possibly share a jowl with Thabo Bester. All of those are still very much open-ended questions that I imagine authorities are going to have to answer desperately, especially when that briefing kicks off, we understand, at around 8 o'clock this morning, where hopefully we'll get more details around the arrest in Tanzania, bringing them back onto South African soil and ensuring that if in fact they are guilty of what we probably know they are, that they're arrested.
Yeah, the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, said to give that update at 8:30 this morning. And, of course, you can catch it live right here on the AM Report. Ayanda Nyati is my co-anchor. Thanks very much indeed for that update. Live to us there from Lanseria Airport, where just a couple of hours ago, the time we have is 3:59. That's when Thabo Bester, probably the country's most wanted convicted rapist and murderer, was brought back to home soil alongside his girlfriend, Dr Nandipha Magudumana. The story is most certainly far from over. And just a note to our viewers, the photographs we've been showing you of their landing at Lanseria Airport, credit there goes to journalist Mzilikazi wa Afrika.